like
I feel very confident. Our advisor, Mr. Nick Seidler from the Res Life Department, arrived, but oh well. I'll have to go on without the man. The man personally spoke with former MSOE President Robert Spitzer about the opening of this very building. So that would be kind of a cool story to hear. But I'll be starting off the meeting, it's more of, oh yeah, okay. So an introduction of what this club is, what we focus on. We'll be kind of, we dabble in the history of long ago. Now this would be things that nobody would be expected to remember when we're talking 100 years ago or more. So there are some things like that people may be intrigued by. That man there next to that bus that continues to be in our science building is the legendary Fred Book of the Allen Bradley Corporation. Now, this man donated a significant amount of money to MSOE in order to allow us to
the science building.
Yeah.
It is named after him.
Well,
technically there's the Hall of Science and then there's the Fredlock Engineering Center. They are different buildings.
They are different, but
Trust
connected.
me.
Same.
And then obviously MLH is named after
Margaret was
Margaret.
the female companion of Fred. Yeah.
Some would say.
Yeah, and actually the pronunciation of Lock or Look is something that is heavily debated on this campus. And that is a question I am interested in solving myself. So maybe we can talk to the family and figure out how do you say your name.
So we do a little interview.
This building here is the science building.
Yes.
With a different set of paint, but that is an old picture of the building, in fact. And of course, Carl Werwath, the legend himself, on St. Patrick's Day, handing over the university to St. Pat. So that's part of what we cover is very long ago. Also, there's more recent history. You would be surprised how much this university has changed in the last 20, 30 years. We've got the destruction of the C building, which at the time was MSOE's, not the oldest. The oldest, in fact, is still the direct supply building that would be on our campus, but that was certainly one of the older ones.
There was a lot of interesting things. There was a full-size single-seater Crew aircraft in there, as well as a pool.
A pool.
There was a pool and the original amateur radio club station.
Of course, the original amateur radio club station. I do have some funky bird poop pictures of the C building before it was torn down.
My former roommate Stan was in the C building.
Oh yeah? That's neat. Betty Albrecht of the Residence Life Department also worked in the accessibility department in the C building, which is interesting because that building was not ADA accessible. So in order to get to her office, you would have to leave the building, go to an exterior door, and then re-enter.
So it's like the science building.
It is just like the science building today. This fella here is Newman. Actually, a senior design team between last year and this year, they're both working on building Newman 2. Newman 2, the new and improved, even though the new and improved Newman 2 has only one arm and several mechanical issues to be figured out. So Newman was MSOE's robotics spokesman, built entirely by senior design teams. He was featured on local television, and he had a fascinating voice. So Newman was quite the fella. There we can see the St. Pat tradition continue, like you've seen previously. Carl Werwath, here Dr. Beets would hand over MSOE to St. Pat, and actually, I believe the last two St. Pats that were selected were actually women. So that shows you how MSOE really came to the modern age with our traditions. And we had our St. Patricias at the end of the line. This desk here, you may not recognize where the heck this is. Does anyone want to take a gander?
IT.
That is the old IT help desk. So it used to be the student life desk. People could go there and purchase movie tickets, find out information about what to do around Milwaukee. Kind of a funky place to be. Now, these things all predate me. But even I can say, in my 3 years at this university, well, back in my day, I tell you things, they were different. And boy, were they. In the last 3 years, we've seen our old Roy W. Johnson cafeteria disappear and transform into our new Create Institute makerspace. The Skylight Deli has been fleshed out into an entire full-service cafeteria. The CC great room with an airplane in it. No more. Not quite as great, but you know, nice and renovated. Very cool. If you ever go
Second airplane they got rid of.
towards the campus life office in the back of the third floor of the CC, the ceiling there is completely unrenovated. Very, very rusty, very gnarly. So you can see parts of the old pre-renovation building still around there. That is where the new Welcome Center was actually the Todd Weir Auditorium. So I took many a calculus exam in the Todd Weir Auditorium during the COVID era, but also we had winter formal dances, other things. There was a bar in there. That's not in the picture. That was kind of cool though, actually. We had a bar in the basement of RWJ, so below here in the cafeteria-ish, approximately. There was a bar. There was a bar in the Todd Weir Auditorium. So, you know, you're in Milwaukee, you have a little brews on, drinking age goes up, and suddenly the bars are no longer on campus. Who would have thought, you know? So that's kind of, you know, something that I was like, well, I can be that old man and wave my hand and say, oh, you know, this is how things used to be for me. So that's why part of why I started this blog. Of course, my grandma was a history teacher for 30 years, and she always, you know, enjoyed talking about the way things were. Certainly when she moved to my hometown, when she started teaching, it was all cornfields, and now it's developed into this suburban area. So she can say, oh, back in my day, this was a one-room schoolhouse with cornfields, and we walked uphill both ways in the snow. Now look how good we got it. So we got that in common, of course. Also, you know, as an aside, you know, I'm already on a tangent. My grandma helped get ladies the right to wear pants at her school.
Nice.
That's how long she was there. They used to always have to wear dresses, but then she petitioned the principal with a group of students to say, let them wear pants. So, finally, the headline, what I've attracted you all here with on my Instagram post, my team's post, sharing some information on the good old, the library itself, the building that we are in. Now, I believe, and I'm going fully off my memory here, that this building opened in 1979?
Well, 1979 or 1980?
1980. One of those two. Around when Dr. Steve Mayer started teaching here. Yeah, that's another fun fact. So Gerald Ford, and actually I didn't notice, but there is a picture there in Colorado, a far better picture than that one of Gerald Ford here. So you might want to stop by and check that out at some point. But truly, Gerald Ford was in attendance at the dedication of this library. And so MSOE Dimensions, the marketing department in their infinite wisdom, did publish a piece on this. And that is something I can read out to you in this nice story time. Now this was only published last year, and I did find some incorrect information. As we know, the marketing department is primarily here to sell MSOE and not tell things the way they are. so that's kind of how that works. But an individual by the name of Kent Peterson, who is said to be of the class of '99, documented and shared MSOE's most memorable moments. His journey at MSOE began as a photographer, but saw him take on positions of increased responsibility. including as the university's photographer, videographer, director of academic media services, and first webmaster. Now this is the first issue I have with this. As Mitch may be aware, Dr. Eric Durand was in fact MSOE's first webmaster. Now this was not a fully fleshed out website, but it certainly was msoe.edu, and if you've seen websites from the 1990s, it was exactly what you would expect. There were flashing GIFs, there was this marble gray background, and it said, "Welcome to MSOE" in bright green letters. So that was what a student-created MSOE website looked like in 1997. So, anyways, back to this photographer who was the first actual webmaster at MSOE. His career offered him a front row seat to the university's history, and spanned 3 presidents before he retired as manager of video and multimedia in March of 2021. MSOE Dimensions sat down with Peterson to find out what moments really stood out as highlights, and to get a first-hand account of what happened behind the scenes. So, Mr. Kent Peterson says he got to know Dr. Spitzer pretty well over the years. He loved talking to outside groups and community organization. So Mr. Photographer Kent Peterson created a lot of slides for Dr. Spitzer's work and traveled with him to set up. Often they would put on a show that required 21 slide projectors. Dr. Spitzer was a mentor for Mr. Peterson, and he said he was very honest and upright. Yeah. In the early 1980s, MSOE held recognition dinners for faculty and staff in the Roy W. Johnson Residence Hall cafeteria. Dr. Spitzer wanted more people to attend these things, so cameraman Peterson brainstormed an idea with Vice President Joe DiCarlo, another one of cameraman Peterson's mentors, and decided to photograph every person on the job and create a 3-projector slideshow entitled A Day at the Life of MSOE. This worked to attract staff members to come to this dinner, and they did in fact come in droves. Now, this escalated from a simple picture slideshow to a whole affair where by 1986 or 7, they created this grand demonstration with Eye of the Tiger as the theme song, and they brought in a live tiger on the stage. Now, Mr. Cameraman Peterson is quoted saying, I say in quotes here, "When they brought the tiger on stage, I remember thinking, wow, he is really close to the audience." Some folks in the front row were pretty terrified. But the truth is that the tiger was pretty ancient, and he was mostly growling out of sheer grumpiness and not actual hunger. He says that he remembers being on the stage with the tiger more than the actual slideshow. So, that's the tiger story. Now, the dedication of the library itself. In 1980, former U.S. President Gerald Ford, who was friends with Robert Spitzer, dedicated MSOE's Walter Schroeder Library. Peterson was there to document the occasion as the cameraman, of course. Now, what he remembers most was his brush with the law. As you know, Gerald Ford is a very important man, and he is constantly surrounded by his Secret Service agents. Now, people who were going near the president had to be background checked by the Secret Service. And there were Secret Service agents all over the place, including on the rooftops. After the event, the Secret Service provided a report to President Spitzer and MSOE's vice president. The report said that the event was wonderful, except for one photographer who kept going into restricted areas. Of course, this was cameraman Peterson. He had the impression that this was his territory and he could go wherever he wanted. Whenever he strayed from the restricted zones, he did not get shot or tackled, but in fact, he was only nicely turned around and pushed in the right direction. Now, Mr. Peterson, in this interview, continues on to talk about long-distance education and MSOE's early experience with that. He says that in the mid-1980s, the VCR was quickly becoming one of the most widely used entertainment technologies. So a new pilot program was started where Mr. Peterson helped MSOE take advantage of this technology to launch a distance education program. The university built a classroom fully equipped with lighting and equipment to produce a television program. And they had a control room with cameraman Peterson running a one-man show. They would record lectures and discussions, copy them on tape, and overnight mail them to students. Office hours would be handled over phone calls, and so if a student felt so inclined, they could call into the class. So basically, that is the story of the man who did in fact retire last year. That is the extent of what I have. If you're not in the teams, I recommend joining. Of course, you're joined with some members of the actual library staff here, and I believe who work in the archives specifically. So I believe they may have some things to show today.
Yeah.
Or I guess we should start with what the archives do and how you have a role in it, maybe. Introduce yourself.
You want to go first?
You can.
Okay. My name is Taylor. Technically, my title is E-Resources and Systems Librarian, which means I just make sure that all the databases you need to use work. And myself and Molly here, we both have backgrounds in archives. That's what we studied when we got our library science degrees. And so we've kind of taken over as like working in the archives that we have, which is kind of right now a little nuts. So we're working on organizing it and making sure that we can actually find things, because that's what an archive is. It's very well organized stuff, basically, and it's stuff that relates to the purpose and mission of whatever the host institution is. So in our case, that's MSOE in engineering. So I did bring some stuff about, say, if you were a person in the 1940s and wanted to come to MSOE, what would that look like? But,
Yes, my name's Molly. I'm technically the cataloging metadata and interlibrary loan librarian, but like Taylor said, I have a background in archives, worked in a few and volunteered in a few. And I'm originally from Iowa, and I moved here for grad school, and I married an MSOE alum. So I know a lot about the place and fun stories about, the happenings here in the mid-2000s, because like all the people in my wedding also went to MSOE, because not all of his friends were from here. So yeah, it's a cool place. But yeah, the archive, I think nuts is a good way to describe it, because there's never really been a dedicated archivist who's worked here. It's always been people on contract for like a couple of years to get a couple of projects done. So we have kind of a team's approach now, and we're hoping to make it much more accessible for all in the near future.
yes.
But it takes a lot of work, and there's only 2 of us, and we have actual jobs with titles instead of archivist, unfortunately. So
Yeah, so I just kind of grabbed, it was a crazy day with, we got to hang out in the basement for like an
for
hour.
the tornado.
Yeah, so I got very distracted, but I did grab some stuff that I thought was pretty interesting. And it shows you what kind of, they're basically promotional materials for MSOE dating back, I believe the earliest one might be from the 1930s. There's one called Photo Story. And then there's also this really cool display guy. I can show you. It's a report on the Milwaukee School of Engineering and its partnership with industry. That would be a terrible partnership. We're gonna injure you. Yeah, so it came with a little stand like this, which is pretty cool. I'm sure someone presented it as so. And something I think is pretty interesting is that when you look at all this old stuff there, you could come to MSOE and get like a 2-year program, almost like going to a tech school. So like right here in this pamphlet, where the Milwaukee School of Engineering address is Milwaukee 1, Wisconsin. That's the mailing address. It says you can get a service degree, which is 6 to 12 months. You can get it in electricity, welding, refrigeration, or heating. Or you can get a technician degree, which is 1 to 2 years, or a professional, which is Bachelor of Science. So I thought maybe you guys would like to look at some of these. And since it is kind of like this technical school stuff got brought up, I thought you could also take a look at this little pamphlet, or I guess it's very large, about vocational and adult education in Wisconsin. So when I was kind of putting one of these collections together, I found out that we either still have or don't really have anymore this partnership with the Fox Valley Technical College. And I learned, that every city in Wisconsin of a certain size has to have a technical school. So that's why you'll see them in like, there'll be, Green Bay, Appleton, Superior, all these places of a certain population have to have a school that provides technical education. And the other thing is that I learned when I was looking at veteran stuff is the GI Bill, when it was passed after World War II, people kind of really went nuts and took advantage of it by starting their own schools. So you could people were advertising for come to my school of chicken science, and people would send their money and they'd get money from the government because they're a school, and then they wouldn't really teach you anything. And so when they cracked down on that, MSOE had to step up and be like, no, we're actually a real school and we provide degrees and stuff. We're not just a technical school. But I thought this would be a fun thing to take a look at. It's very, very 40s, a lot of rural women at school, that kind of stuff, and future homemakers of America. So I will pass that around for you. It's from 1948. It's fun stuff.